Welcome back to NGF News, everybody. This is our latest global developments episode. Before we start, make sure to follow us on all of our social medias at NGF.news for Twitter and TikTok, and then NGF_news for Instagram. So we've got three topics today that we're going to discuss that are fairly interesting. The first one is Russian fears of U.S. expanded presence in the Asia Pacific. The World Bank agrees to a $7 billion 5-year partnership with Egypt, and the vote of no confidence in Paris and a failing French government? Question mark.
Question mark. So we're just gonna go straight into the bat with Russia's fears of a U.S. expanded presence in the Asia Pacific. So on March 22nd, Russia announced that some of its Bastion coastal defense missile systems were deployed in Paramushir. Paramushir is one of the Kuril Islands where Japan claims is their own territory. Russia has stated this is in response for the U.S. trying to contain Russia, particularly Russia and China in the east.
Yeah, very interesting. The funny thing is, actually, a month before this happened, the U.S. was boosting its military role within the Philippines. So, obviously, a clear, direct response. The U.S. military is actively building 9 facilities on separate islands. This is also coming from security fears from Japan and South Korea, who have both made it known, first for South Korea, that they don't feel safe with North Korea testing all these missiles on their border, and Japan does not feel safe with the increased um, presence of the Chinese military in the South China Sea. And then now they have on Japan doesn't technically claim those islands, like the northernmost islands.
They
They claim
were
the
they were
southernmost
they're
of
still
the Korea.
contested though because of
Yeah,
after World War II
whatever that
and
treaty is that
yeah,
they still won't sign to this day that technically hasn't ended a long, long war.
right.
But this has a lot of interesting security developments within this region. People are really focused on the Ukraine war right now, and we tend to put aside the developments that are going on within the East, specifically Asia, because first off, North Korea is becoming increasingly more aggressive.
Oh yeah.
China is becoming increasingly more aggressive. And on top of that, the Russians are becoming increasingly more aggressive on their eastern border. So this is changing the whole security complex of the East and a lot of problems for the United States and allies.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely because Russia now sees the importance of protecting their east side as well. You see China is expanding their military presence there because they fear that, well, the U.S. is, like you said before, growing their military presence with the Philippines, Japanese increasing their military budget and providing to Ukraine as well. So they fear that because of this increased military presence from U.S. and Asian allies, that China might not be able to handle all this. And the Russians basically are saying, listen, we need to do something. So just in case the Chinese aren't able to handle all this going on,
Which they are.
yeah, I mean, they're doing fabulously right now, handling the pressure from the United States and its Asian allies. But they also need a more direct involvement. It's more like an insurance policy, is how I see this
Yeah,
in my eyes.
it's very interesting because the Biden administration has lowered the military budget from about $900 billion to $783 billion. So that's a big
It's a
budget
big chunk,
cut,
yeah.
and mostly due to the fact that we've been pulling out of the Middle East because it's becoming a more secure region outside of Iran and Israel's conflicts, and Syria and Yemen, which has been also been going on the better side as well recently. But the Trump administration said that they were going to have a more Asian focused, and specifically China focused foreign policy, and the Biden administration has been doing a lot of that, especially when he took office. Then the Ukraine war happened. Now it's been pushed to the back burner since February 24th when the invasion was. Not until it was March, I think, 15th that the U.S. announced that they're actively building military bases, which means they've been doing that for months in
Right.
advance. So now the policy is starting to shift backwards. If you're the United States, Mike, here's a question for you. If you're the United States, do you get India involved? Do you get Australia involved? Do you get ASEAN involved in building up not just maybe not a military force, but a security alliance.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
That's all. Absolutely. This is a strategic advantage, and I would send a message to China to say, listen, you have all these Asian countries that are lining up and saying, what you're doing in the South China Sea is completely ridiculous, and I have all this to show you. Now, this could spark the Chinese saying, well, now you're building up a military presence. Russia, help me out. So they're going to park more missiles in the north of where those islands are. So I do believe that yes, this will send a strong message to the Chinese and to the Russians as well. So that's why I do believe that we do need to engage in this military partnership with India and Australia. It's the only way, in my opinion, now that we can show to China to quit it before it's too late.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Now, the biggest one thing for me is that Australia, I know, is going to be on board with this kind of region. Obviously, the UK will be
I
jumping
mean,
on
yeah,
board as
they
well.
already have a AUKUS, so
Yeah, so this won't be a big issue, and I don't think ASEAN will be an issue considering the Philippines is the second largest country. Well, I believe it's the second or third largest country in the agreement. I don't think Indonesia or the rest of them will come on and say like, "Oh no, we don't want the United States military presence. We're not going to support them or cooperate." I believe they will. The biggest issue is going to be getting India to cooperate because of the recent friendliness between China and
and
India in
yep,
terms of economics. There's still a lot of, obviously cultural and religious things that
some
are
border
butting
disputes too,
heads.
right?
Yeah, border disputes,
Border
stuff like
disputes
that.
as well.
But economically, they're becoming friends, and Xi is trying to become an ally with India, considering that also India relies a lot on Russia, Russian oil to be
Right.
specific.
I mean, yeah, it's very interesting to see what the Indians are going to do these next couple of months, maybe years. Maybe they want to accept full Chinese support. Maybe
Yeah,
they're like, okay, well, we don't believe in the U.S.'s strong military presence. We don't believe that the United States is helping us economically. China, we invite you completely to help us out in India, which I hope that doesn't happen because they're India and the United States. What they do have is a lot of students that migrate back and forth between the United States and India,
yep.
which the youth could say like, listen, we don't want China. We want to work with the United States. So the youth is also going to play a major part in whether or not the deciding factor of who does China partner with.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I hope so. Because in India, their relationship of abstaining in the UN to the vote against the war in Ukraine was eye-opening, I
That was
think,
pretty
for
major.
a lot of people
Yeah.
because we really thought that India was not only an ally but like a close ally in the regions. So hopefully they'll. I'm not saying they have to provide military. I just would like to hear like support of whatever we do. So China's like, okay, there's a lot of people against us right now. The next biggest thing for me, I've posted some uh past episodes, especially when we did our topic of the week on how the United States needs to help with security, um, stability in the Eastern Asian region.
Yeah.
Japan and South Korea, they really, really need to get their, excuse my French, their shit together and start
Start working
becoming
together. Yep.
friends for the time being. They don't have to solve all their issues, but they got to do something.
Please watch that episode. Just so you know what we're talking about.
Yeah,
But
but
yeah, I totally agree that in order for this strategic alliance to work, that the one of the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? Not drawbacks, it's setbacks.
yeah.
One of the biggest setbacks is the South Korea Japan relationship. They're
Mhm.
kind of like in a love-hate situation when the US is they're like, "Oh, okay. Nothing's happening here." And then when the US is not there, they're like, "I hate you. Please leave." But yeah, just to add a little wrench into this talk, uh, what I'm thinking here is when I was reading up on this, was this an attempt for Russia to start possibly supporting China to put tensions in Taiwan? Is this the start of something new in that region? Because what I'm thinking is, what if Russia is like, okay, how do we get the Chinese to directly support us militarily? What if we start some sort of initiative where we start creating tensions in that area to give the Chinese the upper hand in Taiwan to try to kind of serve as like a distraction?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking. I think that this could be the start of something, and that their Eastern Front is going to be more militarily active,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Maybe.
And
This is a
so
big if.
that's
That's a
really
long shot,
it
though.
is a long shot. But I honestly don't think so because I mean they met last Monday,
Yep.
Xi and Putin, and discussed not even the war in Ukraine. They discussed how they feel they're being contained and surrounded by the United States. This is a big no-no of first off putting missiles on contested territory or missile defense systems, and second off putting them on Japanese, who are is very neutral country. They're just trying to piss some people off right now, and specifically the Japanese. And the Japanese, of course, is going to call us, be like, "Hey, you know, what the heck? Like,
Yeah.
why aren't we doing something about this?" And which is probably one of the reasons why we're putting military bases in the Philippines and around those islands to protect the South China Sea and protect Taiwan. Um, so maybe I actually would argue that it is a ploy to try and cause confusion and
Yep.
craziness because South Korea already has to deal with North Korea. That's a crazy thing. The United States recognizes that. Japan don't really have many things to fear except for China. And the
Right.
United States and ASEAN are kind of like a buffer to them because ASEAN keeps them economically like, oh, we're going to be a force. If you screw with us, China, we'll screw with you back. Japan, same thing. We have the United States, we have Australia. India is already an issue for China, so they feel like they're safer than South Korea does. But
Right.
now the missiles are there. That's
I
going to
think
put
that's
Japan on
almost
the
like
back
a
foot.
response to like, oh, you visited Ukraine. Now I'm gonna park some missiles here if you don't
Yeah,
mind. The timing was just amazing.
impeccable.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, well, this is what happens in response of you visiting Ukraine. So, do you have anything else on this?
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say that for policymakers, the security, I get we're focused on Ukraine, and we should continue to have a majority focus on Ukraine, but it should not be a complete focus because, first off, Ukraine's winning the war, and it's not close. It's not going to be close unless Chinese give them weapons. And to prevent that from happening, we have to respond to these security issues. And honestly, we need to try and remake friends with China. We need to go up to them and say, hey, like this war is not benefiting either of us. And we know we've been at each other's throats, but we're the two biggest economies in the world. So we just really need to focus on trying to
I
de-escalate all these
strongly
things.
agree with that.
Yeah.
We are in a time where we just need to look at each other and say, listen, like I know, well, like what you said, we've been at each other's throats. You just need to calm down now, and we need to figure this out because this is not going to work. This is not going to work at all. So,
No.
yeah, that's a fantastic point you made there
Yeah.
at the end. If you have nothing else on this, we could move to the World Bank one.
Yeah, for sure.
So this one I found quite interesting. I was just kind of just scrolling through and I found this. So the World Bank has agreed with Egypt to a $7 billion 5-year partnership. So it'll start sometime in 2023 and it'll end in 2027. The goal of the $7 billion is to focus on boosting private sector jobs, create better healthcare, better education services, and funds for adapting to climate change. So this whole thing is called the Country Partnership Agreement.
Yeah.
It's kind of essentially just a big loan from the World Bank. That It's kind of like a bailout for Egypt. They were like, Egypt was hurt from
Oh,
the economic setbacks in 2022. So this is kind of like half like a save me loan and half like a strategic um loan for Egypt to develop.
yeah.
So I think this is a fantastic idea, to be honest with you. I wish the World Bank played a more direct role like this, where they gave out a bunch of low interest loans with a promise on like return on investment. But there's a little bit of concern on whether or not Egypt will um keep their promises
Yeah.
because they promise that they're going to move from being a state owned from having state owned businesses to more privatization, but we haven't been seeing that yet. So
Yes.
what are they going to do with this money?
It's interesting because on that note, they were going to sell their assets, but for some reason in March, their sales just got delayed. Um, and so this was after the World Bank started to give them money to, or after they created the deal. So the fact that the assets are on hold may be just a World Bank thing trying to count up all the assets, making sure that when they sell it, make
filling
it
out the balance sheet.
privatized. Yeah, just some accounting things. But I agree that although I love the plan, I don't like the amounts. The amount I believe is too much. I mean,
I think it's probably adjusting for inflation as well. If they're trying to boost jobs and also fund initiatives for climate adapting to climate change. I don't know what that exactly means and what they're trying to do. This language is pretty vague on what they mean by adapting to climate change. There's a bunch of different ways
oh yeah,
they could adapt to climate change. Like, are you going to put this towards like what cleanup? We're going to put this towards investing in green projects. Like, I wish they would tell us more, but so far this is what we have for language.
yeah. It's a pretty broad language to say the least. Um, and so this is my big issue with the 7 billion specifically going straight to Egypt. First off, their economy last year, they're the second largest economy in Africa, 469 billion GDP, fairly large for their population. They have about a $4,540 per capita.
Interesting.
So it's fairly high. When you look at the highest GDP is Nigeria, 504 billion. Their per capita GDP is $2,326. So a little difference in the discrepancy of wealth within a country. But I love the idea because first off, Africa is probably being hit the hardest because they have still not yet gotten the technology to and the development to harness their natural resources. So they're relying a lot, especially on Russian oil. Egypt also, for climate change reasons, doesn't have enough water. They rely mostly
Oh yeah,
on
that's true.
the Nile. So one of their biggest projects that they were focusing on is the desalination plants. They're hoping by 2050 to have 8.8 million cubic meters of
Yeah,
water to desalinate water so that
yeah,
they can,
gotcha.
make sure that people
But
don't
even that,
die.
like, what? How much could that cost?
Man, it's going to cost a lot, but it's not 7 billion. I mean,
I would hope that they're going to use the money to fund some green projects,
yeah, I hope
especially
so.
for rural development. That's
Yeah,
all in Egypt.
they need it.
Going back onto the directly receiving 7 billion, it's going to be where they're going to get 1 billion per year, plus 2 billion over the span of 5 years from the International Finance Corporation. So it's not just like a lump sum. They're going to get it little by little, which I do like because they can take their time with it and see what they're actually doing with the money every year,
Hmm.
and they can strategize out, listen, you are not using your funds efficiently, or you are using your funds efficiently, whatever. So they can use every year to add up the balance sheet
Yeah.
essentially. So I mean, I hope it works out for them. They really need this money. Like you said, they did rely on a lot of Russian oil. They could also look locally too, and to their Middle Eastern partners as well for oil.
Yeah, which is
That's what
something
I
that's
was thinking of too.
interesting. Their relationship with Saudi Arabia is really good. As of recent years, it used to be horrible with Turkey, but now they're back in discussions
Right.
on normalizing relations. But I mean, here's my biggest problem with the 7 billion because I get it, they're doing it over years. And I obviously it's good that they're doing that because Egypt is incredibly corrupt. Like
Oh,
it is so
yeah.
corrupt after the Arab Spring. They just lost all of their abilities to govern in recent years, which is probably why they're needing this help. They're probably in so much debt. I would have rather instead of the 7 billion going to just directly to Egypt, I would have rather them take, let's say, $30 billion and give it to the African Union. Divide it up
Interesting.
over poorer nations and richer nations because a country like Egypt doesn't need 7 billion. 2 billion, they can use that and with the sale of their private assets and companies wanting to already invest could turn that around. Same with Nigeria, same with South Africa, but smaller countries like Tunisia, Angola, they can really use like $3 or $4 billion right now.
I mean, the African Union's received that type of money before,
Yeah.
and where does it go? Do you see anything major happening? That's what I'm worried about when we give money to directly to the African Union is a poor mismanagement. What I want to see with that 7 billion is incentivize people to engage in like public-private partnerships.
Hmm.
As Egypt continues de to privatize to privatize instead of state own everything,
Yeah.
the more they receive in volume of money. So what I want from the 7 billion is to go directly towards these businesses. So no red
It's not
tape,
bad. Yeah.
no nothing. You get a letter from the World Bank. You have received this much. Do X, Y, and Z in your business by this year. I just think that would be more efficient than
Yeah,
just
it's
giving
smart.
the government 7 billion because, like you said,
Because then they would be directly
yeah,
subsidized instead of going through one subsidizing the government, then
and then a bunch of
subsidizing
other
the
red tape and paperwork
yeah
and whatnot to receive the funds.
points. Yeah,
Yeah, and then that business could use it to essentially boost their job growth.
yeah, and that would boost
Yeah.
investment. I mean, if they see the World Bank giving them basically like this is gonna succeed, like they're giving them this money, it's basically gonna help them succeed at this point, especially with the sale of the privatized a sale of government properties to privatize and government industries to privatize. That would be very good for investors, not only to put their own money in it as well, especially in the energy sector within Egypt, that is severely lacking, and they can definitely help. And one of the biggest things that this is a very good stepping stone for Africa in
Oh yeah.
general. So I think the World Bank, you make a good point that the African Union, the money could just go anywhere, just be lost. I think it should just go directly to those countries, however much they need to industrialize or whatever. I'm not saying they should be handing out 7 billion
To the
every
people and
year,
yeah.
but Egypt can, let's say 5 years from now, Egypt is like on the best track ever. They can start to do investments on themselves in smaller countries, and the World Bank would be like, okay, I'm going to do this to Nigeria now. Then Nigeria could go on and help out, and then okay, I'm going to do this to South Africa now. South Africa can help out, and so on. The dominoes keep going down, and
As
then
long
they
as they have a
build up.
sustainable model that is adaptable for every country, because each country has its own problems that it's
Yes.
facing, then I think that'd be perfect.
All Africa really needs right now, first off, is security in the Horn and Central Africa,
Oh,
because
yep.
obviously, pirates and then the problem in the Democratic People's Republic of the Congo. They also just need development because they have the resources to, if they can harness their resources, diamonds, cobalt, and oil, they can be richer than China and the United States.
They can be,
Combined.
yeah.
Combined. Like, they can absolutely destroy
If
all
the
of
Africa
us.
Union in general just plays its role,
Yep.
and it plays a direct role politically and economically.
Yep.
The
And
African
security.
Union and security. The
Horrible.
African Union just needs to be more direct. They need to be
Yes.
like, oh, your shit.
It'd be like the EU.
Yeah. And, oh, yeah, that'd be perfect. If the AU would be like the EU,
Yeah, yeah,
that'd be
perfect.
fantastic.
And I mean, ASEAN is a great example of what countries were completely
Oh
poor,
my God. Yeah.
completely poor, turned around into, I mean, Indonesia and the Philippines, albeit lots of corruption and crime,
But
are developed nations.
they're coming up.
They are
They
basically
don't
developed
develop.
nations.
No, I say they're emerging. Who developed?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, Indonesia especially it's pretty developed.
Yep.
Like it's fairly wealthy. So many people invest in those markets, and the Philippines is right there. I mean, if you look at pictures of their cities, they're gorgeous. And really, the only big problem in those cities, like in South Korea and Japan, in the urban cities, is not petty and violent crimes; it's organized crime. And that's a whole different issue. But I would rather have a country of organized crime
Then
than a country of violent and petty crimes because people aren't afraid to, you're not going to see homeless on the streets. You're not going to be afraid that your store's going to be robbed because they're getting their money through other avenues that aren't probably necessarily within the state. They're probably more outside the state.
right.
And they're selling because organized crime runs like a business. So, you know, I think that's a much better problem to deal with. I mean, Indonesia has
I
done
mean,
all
it's
this,
a
but
problem, but I mean, it's better than having to deal with essentially terrorism. So
yes, terrorism, which is actually a problem in Indonesia, but that's not as bad as it used to be. It's
yeah,
not as bad as it used to be.
yeah.
So, but
So
they're a model, and I think the African Union can look at that and say, "Hey,
do it.
they can do it. I
If
mean,
they
they
did
can.
it,
Yeah, more
they
resources.
can do it. It's just like everyone's just out for themselves in Africa. They all want their own bit of power, and that's
Yeah,
what's going to hold them back.
that's a cultural thing too. Unfortunately, because there's such cultural divide within
Yeah,
Africa. I think there's like 30,000 different languages
something
spoken
like
and
that.
like
Yeah,
thousands of different cultures and dialects. It's like even within like you look at Rwanda, you can't even like be in your own country until recently. without being prejudiced against each other. And same in the Democratic Republic of the
Yep.
Congo. It's Angola has that kind of issue. It's still about a big like they're still living in a older time. So it'll hopefully change in the next 20 or so years. But yeah, I mean, this is a good stepping stone. The World Bank is doing the right thing, I think, by saving
I
the second
strongly agree.
biggest African Union power from complete financial collapse, which would just destroy that country
I just hope
and
that
continent.
Egypt is responsible with this money because they're getting a once in a lifetime opportunity here to do something with that money. I mean, the World Bank has stepped in when they had to bail out Greece as well in the IMF, but they're
Right.
just
No one's ever gotten this much money, not just to bail you out, but to develop.
to develop.
Like
Yeah,
this
I think
is,
this is almost like a prototype essentially program
yep,
from the World Bank. Maybe they're trying to see what they can do new now, is giving out direct loans to countries and saying, "Hey, you use this money to fix yourself and develop." So this could also, if Egypt does it right, it could be a model for the World Bank to why not just give money out to
how about
directly to
South America too,
exactly,
Latin America in
yeah.
general.
So more like a pilot program in my eyes, but I just
Yeah,
hope that you know what else they could do here is they if Egypt successfully uses this money and keeps up with every single promise in whatever agreement they made. We don't obviously know the details of every single agreement, what they do with that money,
yeah,
but they should just turn it into grants.
not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And like if you keep up on your promises, you should be rewarded. Of course, they can't just grant out 7 billion. They can grant out some of it.
500 million, do this.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we see you've gotten desalination and figured it out. How about we focus on the energy sector? 500 million. Boom.
Yep.
Subsidizes
And
it.
that's how you incentivize that's how you incentivize innovation in a country too.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, okay, look, they're getting 500 million just figuring this stuff out.
Yep.
And that gets your people going, and it basically forces your government to move from being state owned to now encouraging privatization
Yep.
because the people are getting all this money. So
Yeah. They're
hopefully we see that too. We're gonna. I mean, it's a 5 year thing progress, so we'll see what they do with the 7 billion. But I
I,
hope they become one of the most developed. Well, they turn from develop. Are they considered emerging yet?
they're emerging. I'd say Egypt. I'd say
Yeah,
Egypt is pretty.
emerging.
They're developing. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
developing.
So I just hope we see like a little bit of not even a little bit. I want to see some progress actually until now to 2027.
I mean, the biggest thing for me over the 5 year mark is that it's not, it's like a like please do this fast. It's not a we're gonna do this by 2050, and then someone else comes in and they're like, oh, I don't want it anymore.
Yeah.
This is like a let's get this done. Let's show that in 5 years we can do this.
We could do more than what the SDGs
Yeah, what the
called
SDGs
out
are
for
doing.
2030.
Yeah, and then we can keep proving that we can do this consistently.
Yep.
Egypt's obviously a corrupt nation. If they get the ability and they do this over the 5 years, they can start saying, it's not impossible. It's not possible for corrupt nations to turn around. And Egypt is not incredibly corrupt.
Right.
They're corrupt, but they're not like the Philippines. They're not like the Philippines or Brazil.
Right.
So they can definitely turn it around.
That's all I got for the for that one. You
Yeah.
want to go on to France now?
Yeah, let's go to the developing, see what's going on. All these other countries are doing great things in the developing world, but the developed world is on another one right now.
Yep. First world problems right here. We're going to talk about. Right
Oh,
now.
yeah. So, France pension reform, I think, even if you don't watch the news, you've seen this, you've heard about it, we've talked about it. Just to go over the pension reform as a whole, the French government, Macron specifically, realized that, hey, we have an aging population like the rest of the world has. We don't have very high immigration as of the moment, which I think hopefully they would change. We need to raise the pensions from 62 to 64 so people can work a little longer so we can have a little bit of a longer workforce. And as you know, in France, if you know history, they hate the government, but they love it at the same time because it helps them, and France is still a beautiful
Just
country.
to add on that, it's also because of their very terrible state pension system. I think it's also running out of money as well,
Yeah,
which
so
is
the-
another
yeah.
additional
That's why the
reason
United States
to
is
why
doing the same thing too
Yeah.
with the Social Security. But
there's
it's a whole mess in,
Yeah.
in France right now. Macron, who's been on the hot seat, decided to make it even hotter, and he decided to invoke, I think it was Article what was it? I have it here. Article 5 or Article 15. I forget which one. Of the French Constitution, which basically allows him to override anything the National Assembly
Yeah.
does and
Still do it
push this
anyways.
through. And so he did that, but they got put on hold because the National Assembly said, "Hold on,
What are you doing?
what are you doing? You can't do that. We're going to have a vote of no confidence." And oh my goodness, they lost by 9 votes,
To be
which is crazy.
to be more specific, it was 278 MPs from both left and right parties,
Yep.
and they needed 287 votes to topple the government, essentially. That was
Close.
unbelievably close.
It's-
Imagine had that been successful.
Yeah.
What the setbacks would have been for the French government.
Well, we would not be going on our trip this summer. That would
that would
not
be
be happening. Another revolution or something of a revolutionary type.
What French Revolution number are we on now?
Yeah, that's like 30. I don't know. I can't count anymore. But sorry for any French people who are watching. But anyways, it's very interesting because just to talk about protests. I mean, 2.5 million people in March went on strike. Another million went on strike in February. I mean, you're talking about like millions of people. The economy's shutting down. All the energy workers are saying, "I don't want to work.
We're not
anymore.
doing this
I don't
anymore."
wanna work." So we just keep walking on every day.
You know what?
We're running on
Let's
nothing.
not fix this problem and raise the pension.
Yeah.
Like, for me, this just does not have any correlation from encouraging people to go back to work to fixing your pension system. I don't see I've done so much research on this. I just don't see the benefits of just raising it from 62 to 64. How do you get people back to work?
You don't. And here's the biggest thing for me is you know how many people, especially within France. The United States is a different story because we're a little bit more developed. But in France, people work even when they hit their pension. I mean, there's a reason why the average age of working people. What was it on the slideshow that we saw? It was like the average age of the working population is from like 36 or 32 to like 40 in France. There's a
I think
reason.
so.
It's
Yeah.
because they want to work. They don't, or they can't afford to not work. A pension's not going to be enough. So the first thing is Macron stupidly invoked a constitutional thing they shouldn't have.
While the whole country's on fire for protests.
Yeah, let's stop the National Assembly, putting him on the hot seat, and she was already on one in the first place. And he's creating more tensions within his own country, which is creating and sparking things in the EU. What's going on in Germany right now? They are striking for airports every day. Every single day they're striking also on trains. The UK, same thing. National Health Services, striking. That's not the EU. But still, it's the Europe in general. Striking. Italy, rail strikes are happening every day. Portugal, rail strikes are happening every single day. This was a normal France thing. This was not a normal
Most
Europe
average
thing.
day.
This was not a Europe normative. Like
Yeah.
maybe Germany, because Germany, they do their own thing there.
Yeah.
But they're like in Italy also does their own thing. But like Portugal, have you ever heard Portugal in the news? Let's get real here. Aside from Cristiano Ronaldo scoring a goal for Portugal, you never hear them in the news. But now all of a sudden, everyone's going out on strike in Portugal. Spain, never hear them. They're going on strike. Luxembourg, they're the richest country in terms of per capita GDP, and people are going on strike. What's happening right now? France is causing too many
You're
problems.
unbelievably passionate about this one, and I love it. I banged on everything. You kind of left me speechless here. What I was gonna say is now we should just move on to like how we figure out how do we get people back into work. That's where I wanted to go next.
Tough question.
I want to start off by saying that you could start small. I don't know if it's favorable, but raising the wage, like it's just a good start. It's a good buffer to get to where you need to be after, which is lowering taxes. Lowering taxes for working people. You can have incentives for people to go back into work. I think what was the biggest concern is that people aren't spending too much time with their families. Was
Yeah,
that
was one of the big things.
yeah? So
Be one issue to solve, but for me, you remember what our Professor True was talking about? One of our professors, she's a French lady, and she says that French, they love security. And the reason why I would say the reason why they're not like security as in like job security. My bad on that one. But they love job security, and part of the reason probably why their pension reform is so screwed up in the millions, they probably have so many government workers, so many local, state, and federal workers, which they don't have states, they have provinces, but that's a different story. They have so many federal workers, their pension's obviously going to have a problem.
Right.
So it's obviously going to be strained. You need to first off increase business and privatize business so that more people
I was
are
just
on a
about to say
business
on a
side.
business
So they're
retirement plan.
investing in whatever retirement plans they have there. You know, in
I was just
America it's the
about to say.
401k, whatever. And that's another thing they can just teach government workers in general. I mean, like my father he's a government worker, but he doesn't just rely on his pension. He has a 401k too. You got to teach them you can do both. I put your money aside to do this and do that, but that's not a big thing in Europe. And Europe is a very
It rely on
lackadaisical
the
society. You
after
know,
you reach that age, you kind of just rely on the government, not really understand what it's like to have a private like
like money
pension plan.
they're so afraid of stocks and investments in Europe for odd reasons, which is funny because the stock market was actually invented in Holland, the Netherlands,
Hmm.
in 30 something.
Yeah.
So
Education and on this matter is highly important.
yeah,
To have people to move away from. And if you create these private, what's the term I'm looking for? It's a agreement between
like
the
public-private partnership.
no, it was a different one. It's I forgot the term of it. But if you have these agreements between the employer and the employee, you
Oh,
don't
like
even,
retirement accounts.
yeah, but it was a specific phrase I was looking for. Anyways,
Yeah.
no big deal. You don't even need to raise the age from 62 to 64 either. Like, I think there should be tax advantages on having a private retirement account as well.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
here, like, if you take it out too early, you'll get penalized for it.
You'll be penalized, yeah.
Well, I don't understand. That's your money anyways. I don't think that should be a thing, regardless of where you are
Yeah.
around the world
There's
too.
special circumstances in the United States, but you're right, I do agree. It's stupid. It is your money.
Yeah.
But look, it's something because right now Macron has nothing,
Yeah,
and I don't think he's going to win re-election, and it's gonna.
he has nothing. He doesn't even know where to go from here. He's just like, well, I'm still gonna change it to 64. Like I don't care what anyone says. Like I don't know what he's going to do here. Um,
He's
yeah, he has a
giving
big
Marie Le
crosshair on
Pen,
his head right
yeah,
now.
he's giving Marie Le Pen so much
hmm
ammunition for the right wing
hmm
governments, and I don't. Me personally, in France, I don't care if it's going to be right wing or left wing. It's going to be chaotic anyway as a government because
Yep.
that's just how they run things. They like to, just push, 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 do things. That's the way they run life. But he Macron has been so good on the international stage with France, and then to have do direct shift to someone who's I am inwards. I am not going to leave. This is France. We're going to focus on France first.
Right.
That is going to turn the EU on its head because they're the second largest economy in the EU. And it's also going to turn the world stage on its head because a lot of other countries are going to be like, oh, well, the UK did it. France is doing it. Italy's doing it. The US did it with Donald Trump.
I'll do it.
Let's all do it. And like, not that Donald Trump was completely an inward looking person. He was just the way he looked outward was a lot different from the most
Most
politicians and
presidents.
most presidents. But in Europe, I mean, when they look inwards, I mean, look at UK. They just struggling because they don't look outwards. They've been out of the UK for what? Or the EU for 4 years now. They just struck their first economic deal
In 4 to 5 years.
like 3 weeks ago. Like they're it's tough. It's so tough when you look inwards as a European country because once one party's in charge, it's like it's so hard to swing back because you just need a simple majority. You need 1/3 in both
Right.
parliaments.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
Crazy.
It's so crazy.
Yep. I can't wait to see these protests when we go there.
It's gonna be interesting because
Yeah.
one of the things we're gonna have to
Assuming that
it's
is
the,
not solved by then.
yeah, true, but if it's not, one of the biggest things we're gonna have to do is walk taxis, because the trains just don't go anymore there. I don't think. Like from all my things that I do in my internship and incident monitoring, I just see
France,
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 just
France,
yeah,
France,
everywhere.
France.
And the fact that they can't run their trains because they don't have enough energy. And then the ones that are running are on strike.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people are relying on their walking abilities now, and taxis are probably having a ball.
Oh, they're having a great time right now. One
Yeah.
more thing before I end this off, I do want to say to the people that these people are not protesting because of the retirement age change. They're protesting because of a failed government unable to address a poor pension system,
Mm-hmm.
unlivable wages, and the economy in general. They're not because I've heard a lot of people saying, "Oh, the French people are overreacting. They got to work another 2 years." This is way more than just that. They've been protesting, and now it's getting worse because the French government is doing nothing about it. I just want to put that out there before people think like the French people are just overreacting and that they could work another 2 years. Yeah, I'm not saying they couldn't. I'm not saying yes,
It's just
but
not the salt. It's not
it's just not the solution to a
the
bigger
entire
problem.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah, they got an economic problem. We'll raise the working age another 2 years. That is
What happens in the next 2 years then? You know what happens? What are you gonna
now
do?
what?
They
Oh no.
yeah.
We'll figure that out later.
I think that's a lot of the people's biggest problem is like, okay, they're raising it 2 years, but what's your plan? What's your plan? What are you gonna do afterwards?
What do
Because
you
that's
even
what they
save in those 2 years? What do the people get in those 2 years? An extra what, 1,000 euros?
not many.
Not many.
And
Not much money.
and what can the government do in 2 years to fix this incredibly lopsided economy?
They already had 1 to 2 years to try to fix it. They,
Yeah, they got nothing. There's nothing else to do.
there's no action plan. There is no implementation process. There is nothing.
Yeah, Macron is not very. He's in the hot seat, and he's not been very good at pleasing the people. He's dealt with a lot of blows, including that yellow vest thing and then COVID. But this one, I mean, if I say if something else goes through that's even remotely controversial, like a little bit,
Yep.
his vote of no confidence could go through next time.
I was just about to say, what if there's another no confidence vote and it
France is going
actually
to be in
passes?
shambles.
Oh my.
They're going to be in shambles because Macron's going to have to either elect someone himself or
Have
the National Assembly elect someone
uh,
or have general elections.
yep.
So, and obviously, the people are going to want general elections. They're not going to want him to choose or the National Assembly to choose.
Yeah.
They're going to want general elections.
So
Crazy
this
world we're
is
living in.
very, very important to keep an eye on for the next month or so. But that's all I have for this latest global developments episode. Do you have
Definitely,
anything
yeah.
else to
That was an interesting one because
I love this.
it was like okay, here's a problem, bad. Here's a good one. Okay, now we're back to that. That's always interesting. But thank you guys for listening. Again, please do your own research. If you have anything to tell us, just like
Reach out to
just
us.
reach out to us.
We
Like
have
any new developments, we'll
all our
post.
social medias. We're on everywhere: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter.
Yeah, we'll see.
Gladly send us a message if you guys want to hear a specific topic. I'm getting a Patreon account started, so you may submit any topics that you do want to hear about as well. But we will reply to our viewers if you do have questions.
Oh yeah,
We are we try to play a direct role when it comes to news. We don't want you to feel like you're just watching BBC. We want direct, how do I say this? Like direct access.
interaction.
Interaction, that's the word I'm looking for with our people.
Yeah,
So
we'll also post anything on our stories that you send us that's interesting.
there's all
That's something that like I'm always trying to actively see. I need to get better at it, but I mean, I'm trying to actively like post things from like the New York Times or Reuters on our stories, so it's like you can see what's going on in the world, and we can see what's going on as well, and give you guys better updates on what's going on because a lot of people could get lost in the noise on important subjects that are being glossed and over because some celebrity just got a dog,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
I love that.
So, yeah. Anyways, thank y'all for listening and have a good one.